Hello and welcome again. So we are going through the capacity building on the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee and International Legally Binding Instrument on Plastic Pollution, and this is being organized by CYMG Plastic Action Working Group. First of all, let's get introduced to the key acronyms that we will be using many times later on. I hope that you already know some of them or all of them. UN is United Nations, UNEP is United Nations Environment Program. You perhaps also heard about United Nations Environment Assembly. One of the key terms that is used for the environmental conventions is MEA, which is Multilateral Environmental Agreement. And then the plastic treaty that we are actually referring to, the formal name for that is International Legally Binding Instrument, ILBI, on plastic pollution. The process that is now facilitating the negotiations on plastic pollution is called the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution, or INC. And then there's also some other acronyms like NAP, NEP, which is National Action Plan or National Implementation Plan. ROP stands for the Rules of Procedure. You may also see another acronym is GYCPP, which is Global Youth Coalition on Plastic Pollution. CYMG, as you already know, the Children and Youth Major Group. So let's get introduced to the INC process. As I already mentioned, that INC stands for the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution, and it started from the UNIA 5.2. During the resumed fifth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, member states adopted a historic resolution, the Resolution 5/14, which set the path to the INC process. And in this resolution, there are a lot of texts. You can obviously view it later, but some key texts that we need to highlight is that the future international legally binding instrument / plastics treaty would include both binding and voluntary approaches based on a comprehensive approach that addresses full life cycle of plastics. That means from production or before that, the extraction of the raw materials to the waste management or the disposal. And this resolution encourages the action by all stakeholders, most importantly, including the private sector. To start this process, there's another working group that was set up to kickstart the process, which is called the Ad Hoc Open-Ended Working Group. And this Open-Ended Working Group had one meeting that was organized in Dakar, Senegal, from 29th of May to 1st of June to prepare the INC process, specifically the roadmap of the negotiation and the rules of procedure. The INC, obviously, as you know, that for any UN process is guided by a specific rules of procedure. For INC process, it's called INC rules of procedure, which is provisionally adopted because some of the segments or paragraphs are not fully adopted yet. That is kept under the bracket, which are the rules on the voting rights and the adoption of decisions. Those are not adopted yet. So that's why the INC rules of procedure is normally referred as provisionally adopted rules of procedure. And then INC obviously has a website. You can also view, you can also find more information on the process. So let's have a look of the timeline of the process, which started for UNIA 5.2. But before UNIA 5.2, there are a lot of deliberations, a lot of efforts to reach to this level. I'm not going to cover this in this call, but you are always, encouraged to, to view that, to learn about that from other sources. So the main process started from the UNIA 5.2, where the resolution was adopted, and then as per the implementation of the resolution, the Ad Hoc Open-Ended Working Group meeting was organized in Dakar, Senegal, as I mentioned, to negotiate the rules of procedure and to set the roadmap for the INC process. INC process formally started from the Uruguay, where we had the first session, which had a lot of discussion. Most of them was the duplication of the same discussion that happened at UNIA 5.2 and Ad Hoc Open-Ended Working Group meeting, but also, gave more clarification on how the process will be rolled out. And then, to be very honest, the substantive discussion was like formally started from the INC2, where There are a lot of discussions happened in the contact groups. And then before INC2, there was a lot of written submissions by member states and the observers, and the submissions by the member states were compiled in a document which is called the options paper, and that was negotiated at INC2. On the basis of the reviews received at INC2 and the written submission after INC2, at the intersessional period between INC2 and INC3, another document was compiled. That was the synthesis report, uh, specifically focused on the elements that was not discussed as INC2, and then whatever discussion had on the elements options paper and the views received on the options paper, then led to the creation of the zero draft text of the treaty. So before the fourth session, there's another important meeting that took place is UNIA 6. Why UNIA 6 is important? Because the fifth session, the resumed fifth session, actually started the process with the adoption of the resolution. And then as per the resolution, UNEP Executive Director reported the outcomes so far. You know, between the sessions, you know, up to the session, third session was reported to UNIA again at the sixth session. So then we had the fourth session of INC in Ottawa, Canada, from 23rd to 29 April, and the negotiations were centered around the revised draft text. How revised draft text were compiled, we will be discussing that later. And now we are again in an intersessional period between INC4 and INC5. We are leading towards the fifth session, which is expected to be the final session. And for this fifth session, it's very important because some of the intersessional works are being carried out, which has been agreed at the fourth session, I mean the INC4, and then a lot of other intersessional works generally are being organized before every subsequent session, which are the regional meetings. And then it's expected to be finished at this fifth session. And then if it's a final draft is accepted and negotiated successfully, then there'll be a diplomatic conference that will be organized next year in 2025 for the adoption of the treaty. And then there's a possibility of having some extended session of INC to, create momentum for getting more ratifications for the treaty, because as you know, the treaty is created for the implementation of the treaty. It's needed to be ratified with different member states, and there's a certain number of member states need to ratify for entering the treaty into force. Okay, let's discuss about how young people are being, getting themselves organized to participate in the negotiation process at INC. So that is through the Global Youth Coalition on Plastic Pollution. What is Global Youth Coalition and when this started from? It started from after the INC 1, the first session, because INC actually went beyond the participation of the UNEP accredited organizations. It also invited different other organizations accredited under the ECOSOC and the multilateral environmental agreements administered by UNEP. Therefore, there's an importance of creating a broader mechanism for facilitating youth engagement in this particular process, and that is being done through this youth coalition. And this UICPP was co-convened by youth constituencies from different categories of participation in the INC process and beyond, from different other constituencies with CYMG. Young people and the world are engaging in the negotiation process through this avenue, and this coalition develops, collective positions of youth for the negotiation before each of the subsequent session. And now, as you know, that we are leading towards a new multilateral environmental agreement or a treaty on plastic pollution. We don't know what is going to be named. Therefore, it's always referred as ILBI, International Legally Binding Instrument, because we never know what it is going to be named, whether it's going to be named agreement or treaty or convention. That is completely to be decided by the member states. So The treaty normally, to reach to the final draft, there are a lot of drafts are being compiled or negotiated before reaching to the final consensus or final decision. So far, we started from the options paper at INC2, which compiled all the written submissions before INC2, and then options papers, or these documents were negotiated at INC2, and then whatever outcomes we had at INC2 that transformed this options paper to zero draft text with another document which is called synthesis report. Synthesis report compiled all the elements that was not discussed at INC2. And there's the zero draft and synthesis report were merged along with the views received at INC3 and was compiled to the revised draft text that was negotiated at INC4. And then a lot of views were received on the text of the revised draft at INC4, and now this is leading towards to a compilation document, which has been agreed by the member states as a responsibility of the Secretariat to compile all the non-papers prepared by the subgroups during the negotiations at INC4. And this compilation document will be the basis of negotiation at the fifth and to be expected the final session. Now, if we divide the draft text of the international legally binding instrument, we can do this in three major divisions. First division is the substantive elements, where we have the preambular section of the treaty objectives, core obligations, and control measures. And then we have the implementation elements as a major division where we can see the means of implementation like financing, capacity building, technology transfer, technical assistance, and other implementation measures like compliance, reporting, national action plans or national plans, institutional arrangements, and others. And then also this treaty is expected to have some annexes which has been kept as a placeholder. Now, what's the current level of the negotiation, right? We had the fourth session so far, 4 sessions so far. And lastly, we had the fourth session that took place in Canada, Ottawa, from 23rd of April to 29th of April. And this over the 7-day period, we had a lot of intense negotiations under 5 subgroups. And these 5 subgroups were divided into, no, so we had 2 contact groups, which is divided into 5 subgroups. So first contact group had 3 subgroups. Second contact group had 2 subgroups. So the exact or the substantive discussion happened in the subgroups. There are a lot of areas of convergence that we had, specifically on the provision of addressing plastic waste management and just transition among few others. But obviously, there are a lot of divergence that I have noted at INC4, specifically on the upstream measures, which to be very specific, the provision of primary plastic polymers and how the chemicals and the polymers will be addressed, how the linkages with other existing instruments will be addressed, specifically the financing and extended producers' responsibility and the scope of the agreement. These are the areas of divergence where the member states have divergent views, and those are captured by the co-facilitators of the subgroups. Now, one of the important thing is that intersessional work. Before the third session, no, at the third session, there was no agreement on the intersessional work. And that's why we lost several months, important months, to do some real work and make substantive progress between INC3 and INC4. Luckily, at the INC4, the member states had an agreement on several intersessional work, specifically 2. And the INC, the committee agreed to convene 2 intersessional open-ended expert groups that will be working during this intersessional period, mostly in electronic manner. I mean, the meetings of these expert groups will be convened online, but obviously there'll be one in-person meeting as well of these expert groups, and that has been scheduled to take place in Bangkok from 24th to 28th of August. And what these expert groups will work on? First, expert group will work on developing an analysis of potential source and means that could be mobilized for the implementation of the objective of the instrument, including options for the establishment of a financial mechanism, an alignment of financial flows, catalyzing finance, etc. And the second expert group will compile kind of a proposal by analyzing the criteria and non-criteria based approaches with regards to the plastic products and the chemicals of concerns in plastic products and the product design, focusing on the recyclability and reusability of plastic products, considering their uses and application. So we understand that the two expert groups will literally make very important proposals on key elements of the treaty. For instance, the first expert group will cover the financing part and other means of implementation. Second expert group will cover different aspects of the plastic products, and the chemicals of concern. Apart from that, the committee also decided to establish an open-ended legal drafting group, and this group is expected to start their work from INC5. They'll not work during the intersessional period, rather they will work during the INC5. And what's the responsibility of this open-ended legal drafting group? This legal drafting group will translate the negotiated text into legally sound text, and obviously in a non-prescriptive manner. And if there is anything that needs more attention, then that will be referred back to the committee. And who are the members of this legal drafting group? In the legal drafting group, the members are mainly the member states. The member states have been asked to designate legal experts from their countries to be part of this legal drafting group. Then another outcome of this, one of the most important outcome of this INC4 session is that the compilation document. So it has been agreed by the member states in the committee that the 5 non-papers that was prepared by subgroups after the discussions, negotiations at INC4, that will feed into a compilation document. The Secretariat has been tasked to prepare this compilation document, and this compilation document will be the starting point for negotiations at INC5. Means, like the revised draft was negotiated at INC4, this compilation document, which will be prepared by INC Secretariat with all the after following all the instructions given by the member states, will be the basis of negotiation at INC5. So here I close this capacity building session, but here are some reference that you can just have a look on for a better understanding of the process and the history of the process.